Betty Mahmood, Giordano Liriano, Lenny Herrera, and Charles Athanasopoulos. And I think I got that right. And if I didn't, I'll make it up to Charles a little bit later on. But listen, they're going to be here and they're debating right now. What are they actually debating? They're actually debating, should the government reduce its military and police presence in foreign countries such as Afghanistan, Iraq, and things of that nature. So now I'm going to step out and we'll introduce you now to the Bronx Great Debaters.
Is everybody ready? Contención. Una, ¿quién somos nosotros? Yo soy Lenny Herrera, me gusta el rock, me gusta la música ranchera, pero no sé cuál identidad soy, mexicano, salvadoreño, puro americano. Nacido aquí, ¿cuál identidad soy? Mi papá mexicano, mi mamá salvadoreña. Aquí porque queremos una nueva vida, pero me preocupo porque quieren hacer todo por ser puro americano, que quieren hacer todo para olvidar sus rutas latinas y adaptar nuevas rutas americanas. Rutas de gente que no nos quiere aquí, que gente que nos busca en nuestra familia, nos buscan porque no tenemos papeles, nos buscan y no podemos hacer nada.
My mind is a battlefield. I watch as I fight within myself, and there's no one that can help. The hand has been dealt, and only I can feel what is being felt. It's a problem within myself. Greek I am, Puerto Rican I am, but I am damned to a life full of assimilating. What's the point of debating when I am lost, a lost cause?
Charles and I are the advocacy. We advocate the creation of coalitions within the debate community in order to jumpstart the movement against white supremacy. We believe you, me, the judge, are the spillover. Join us in the war against police brutality, psychological slavery, Eurocentric thought. Give the oppressed their identity back. Give us a voice. This serves as a prerequisite to the topic and solving for military abroad. I stand open for cross-checks.
Alright, so let's start this cross-examination. What exactly are you guys advocating?
Okay, we advocate like the creation of coalitions of people like who are oppressed to come into the debate community and talk about their oppression in order to jumpstart the movement against white supremacy.
Would it become something like a civil rights movement within like the debate community?
It'll like, it won't be like like sort of, I guess, but it's more like just so like the oppressed get heard and like we stop hegemonic power in other countries, so like we don't go to other countries and like just like Iraq and Afghanistan and like try to like
The way that we are oppressing those people currently, it all started here, so we have to solve for the root problem.
Alright, so basically, how would you guys like solve back for these like instances of oppression?
Well, we will defend that in-round discussion is key.
Like the discourse that we presented around, like how we speak is critical to like breaking down hegemony and like stuff like that.
Alright, so have you guys like ran the same argument at different tournaments? Like, what was the reaction? What was the public's reaction?
People actually started adapting and talking about like their oppression in society. So like we actually think we're creating a movement in the debate community because like we've got people to talk about their oppression.
Alright, that's cool.
Okay, so we understand the racial bystanders that they're trying to solve for. We understand that the system is bad. Therefore, we actually concede that the United States federal government should enforce the constitutional rights of all racial minorities in the United States. Working within the system solves best. In a world where they don't work within the system, is actually going to trumpet their arguments like a civil rights movement where it's just going to go into another bystander. This is Johnson 92. The process in Harvard might be annoying to everybody, and it's only understanding the authorities of the power then they confirm things that we can actually have a change in white supremacy. Structure the responsibility and the subordination of the black and how we actually look around them. This is basically talking about how the standards of blacks and whites is basically like it doesn't make a difference. If we actually make a civil rights movement, it's not going to make a difference. Therefore, we should actually change the system. We should actually talk within the system. We should actually make the federal government change within the system. Okay, so we have to use the system to reform the social change itself. It won't solve this. 795 is necessary to conform to certain degradations. Okay.
All right, let's talk about like what is the system.
Okay, we're basically talking about the United States federal government as a whole.
Okay.
All right, so you talk about how like the state is key. However, like you need opposition. Can we all agree that we need oppositional force to the current ideology in order to...
The opposition wouldn't solve.
The opposition wouldn't solve. So
yeah,
like Martin Luther King Jr., for example, his coalition didn't solve for Lyndon B. Johnson to sign a bill.
Okay, so Martin Luther King did make a difference in society, but the fact that Lyndon B. Johnson actually created...
I have a question. Like, working within the system, like, how do you change individual mindsets? Like...
Okay.
You can look at the Jones evidence that my partner read first. It specifically talks about at Harvard, like there was this like little discrimination raid going on, and like the only reason why like these kids like actually
you work within the system, right? But like, how do you create change in like the debate community?
Because we're not enforcing the system. We're not saying that the United States federal government is gonna like perpetuate all of these like.
Okay, so what makes you think the government that currently oppresses us will solve for the oppression?
Because they've done it before.
The timer?
The switch seats.
Alright. Everybody ready? There are several disadvantages to defending the United States federal government as an agent instead of exerting our own agency as debaters. One, exacerbates exceptionalist politics and the status quo. Two, as citizens, we become complicit agents in the face of American universalism. Three, we become liberal citizens who abandon our understanding of ethical policy making. From this standpoint, we develop and use our advocacy skills to defend policies that are divorced from the ethics within the politics. The reason that the civil rights movement were successful in the 1960s was that they were able to use their own organic intellectual in order to create rebellions against the federal government. In the status quo, movements against oppression or silence are non-existent because of the dominance of the United States federal government and white supremacy. Now you're going to look specifically at this Dr. Shannara Reed Brinkley 2008 card. That traditional knowledge production within the debate community privileges those with institutional and economic power. It specifically talks about this three-tier method that we have to use the organic intellectual and use our personal experience in order to solve. They say that like the United States federal government is key, and how Lyndon B. Johnson he solved by signing this bill into law. However, you need opposition first. The opposition solves back for all of their offense. You're going to group all of their cards to the fact that the federal government won't destroy itself unless we have people that are revolutionary and act as heretics to the federal government's policies. Cross-X.
Okay, why exactly wouldn't the United States federal government solve?
Well, see, the problem is that the federal government, historically, if you go back at Lyndon B. Johnson, the whole example, is that Lyndon B. Johnson didn't solve for it until there was opposition to the government's ideology.
Okay, but wasn't there opposition on Martin Luther King's rhetoric? Like the Black Panthers?
They were a militant group. We're not.
Yeah, weren't they against the rhetoric of Martin Luther King?
I mean, that's
so couldn't we say
Just gonna defend that, like, when you work within the system, like, it's not you who changes the system, it's the system that will change you.
Okay, how exactly do we work within the system, like, exactly?
When you specifically defend the system and say that it's key to policy making, that right there is specifically saying the federal government is good.
Okay, cool. Does Dr. Shannara Reed actually say this?
Dr. Shannara Reed Brinkley specifically talks about the fact that we have to use the organic intellectual. That
how do we not use the organic intellectual?
Because like you read
the current knowledge production within the community.
And like you read cards, but you don't state like what's your actual opinion on the entire thing.
Okay, so we'll like basically like look at their cards our cards first and look at theirs. Okay, first you can look at the Bernie Jones 92 evidence. It specifically talks about how like in Harvard, like there were these little like discriminatory like acts towards the students, and the only way that these discriminatory acts disappeared was because of the enforcement by the president of Harvard. And you can look at our Sullivan evidence that talks about how like we need to have like the systems, and we need to sit here and challenge the system in order to reform it. So basically a combination of those. You can look at specifically to our advocacy that says that we need to sit here and recognize the rights of racial minorities within both the debate community and within the United States. Now let's go into their arguments. First, they make this argument that we're going to make it worse if we work through the government, but we can look at the government as like these organic intellectuals who basically do things for themselves. And next, they say that we don't have good forms of policy making, but policy making always adapts to different people and to like different like societies and things like that. And next, he said that the 1960s rebellions, but those are bad.
How is your knowledge production different from like the way the U.S. creates exceptionalist politics?
Basically, you can view them almost all as the same, because like basically you can look
view all policies in the same way.
Not necessarily.
Didn't you just say that all?
No, wait. The fact that we're actually using the USFG to enforce laws that help minorities is the solvency. It's not.
You can also look back to the
so,
Jones
how do you
evidence.
access the three-tier? Like you were talking about the Dr. Shannara Reed Brinkley evidence, but like, how do you access the three-tier method in a world you don't use your personal experience or the organic?
I mean, like the USFG and the Constitution, the Bill of Rights is the bill.
How do you access the three-tier method?
We access the three-tier method by actually looking at our advocacy. When we sit here and wait for the government to do things for us, that's the only way where people like such as blacks in the South and segregation.
The federal government do something. I can't speak out. I have to let the federal government do it.
We'll allow for a space for you to speak out, but as long as the United States federal government as a whole recognizes it, that's the only way
we'll have no voice because the federal government's gonna do it anyways, right?
That's the reason why you're protesting, right?
Is everybody ready? Everybody ready? Yeah. Judge, you're gonna vote on our advocacy because we are the team that has most in-round solvency in the round. We create coalitions within the debate community to to change ideology, like individual ideology. When you work within the system, you can change the ideology of the system, but you're not gonna change individuals as a whole. Like they don't state like how their organic intellectuality will lead to a spillover in the system. When you can change the system and their ideology, like you can create like a better government. But once like we still have white supremacy, like in individual like ideology and knowledge, like it'll only like recreate itself. Like that's what our evidence states, that like white supremacy will inevitably recreate itself. And we get to the root of the topic. Like we are talking about military presence, but like we're like for allowing like organic intellectual, like the Hispanic body, like our evidence says that like we are currently in the status quo. We're forced to assimilate, so we no longer have to assimilate, so we won't have to go to other countries, and we won't have to be forced to be patriotic. So like in a world where they don't change individuals, all their impacts will be recreated.